Welcome back to another episode of Pro Sex Studios. Today we're going to be looking at the sexual attitudes in this full house of puritanical queens over the aces of self-loathing, Molly's Game. Directed by Mr. Walk and Talk himself, Aaron Sorkin, and starring Jessica Chastain and her cleavage. So, this movie is about a woman named Molly Bloom, and it's about how smart she is, really. Molly makes a lot of money running a poker game. And has some misadventures doing it. What is this movie saying about sex? It's saying sex is a crime, and you're stupid for thinking about it. The first 6 minutes of the film are about Molly's career as a competitive skier. Her dad, played by Kevin Costner, is a psychotically demanding dick, and he expects her to be a world champion athlete. Expecting anyone to be a champion athlete is stupid, because the vast majority of people are not champion athletes. The idea that you're going to point at a child and say you're going to be in the Olympics someday is lunacy, and it's a terrible burden to put on a child, but that's a whole other conversation. Anyway, she wants to be a big old competitive skier, and her dad is terribly demanding. And she has, unfortunately, rapid onset scoliosis as a child, which is a serious problem with the spinal cord that requires some serious surgery, and the doctors say, you can't keep skiing after this, not after surgery like this, where we've propped up your spine with pieces of steel. But she and her hard-ass father decide, mostly her hard-ass father, decide that they're smarter than the doctors, and within a year she's back on skis. Then in her 20s, a freak accident on the slopes ends her skiing career and nearly snaps her already fragile back. Here's my point. We hear nothing whatsoever about her having any romantic or sexual relationship in her teens or 20s, nor even any desire for any. Zero. This is negative meme number 4. As you know from watching the channel, I've got a number of negative memes that I've identified that are repeated over and over and over again in popular culture. Negative memes about sex, and this is number 4. Serious people don't sex. Molly is really smart. Molly's a really talented athlete. Molly is precocious. Molly is excellent in every way. Molly is here to tell you this over and over again. Molly has no sex life whatsoever. She never so much as smiles at a boy. Flash forward to 12 years later. This movie is really badly constructed. It's a lot of flash forwards and flashbacks. But flash forward to 12 years later, Molly is alone in bed late at night. Alone, serious people don't sex, but still a beautiful woman with her hair tousled lying in bed is suggestive. What happens next? An FBI SWAT team calls her on the phone and says, you better come out of there or we're coming in. And she comes out in the hall and they point a bunch of guns in her face and a bunch of flashlights and arrest her for running a quasi-legal poker game. So even the slight sexuality suggested by a beautiful woman lying in bed with her hair tousled is immediately followed by the worst thing that's ever happened to her in her life, or one of the worst things, being arrested by the FBI at gunpoint, which then plunges her into a legal battle. She's now trying to stay out of prison. Flashback to her teenage years, and a video of her being interviewed by her hard-ass father. He records interviews with all of his children every year on their birthdays. He's a psychiatrist, by the way. And he asks her, what do you think about marriage? And she says, it is a trap. He doesn't ask her about sex. She's clearly 14, 15, 16 years old. Doesn't say a word about sex, but marriage, which stands in for sex in this case. It's a trap. Serious people don't sex. Look at how smart Molly is. Flash forward to Molly after her skiing career is over. She is living in Los Angeles. She's moved to Los Angeles, and she is working for a jerk-off named Dean in some vague jerk-off financials sort of company. But Dean is also running a poker game as sort of an informal sideline, and Molly winds up basically running it for him. Dean is really stupid and really unlikable and is setting the tone for virtually all the men in this film. It's about 27 minutes into the movie. We get the first montage, the first of 2 montages, the LA montage, wherein Molly, in her voiceover, wherein she tells us over and over again how smart and awesome she is, and also because Aaron Sorkin can't get enough of listening to his own dialogue. In this first montage, we learn how Molly recruits Fish to the poker game. A fish is an moderately good poker player who's got money to lose and will keep coming back to the game. You don't want to load your poker game up with a bunch of card sharks. Oh no, right? That's no fun for the card sharks. You need some fish in there for the sharks to eat. Molly has invented a system for using beautiful women to locate and identify dysfunctional morons who want to throw their money around at a poker table and talk about how they played poker with rock stars and so on. Molly has invented a system for hand-selecting jerk-offs and bringing them close to her so that she can get rich off them. But Molly will spend the rest of the movie acting like all men are as bad as these hand-picked defectives. There's a lot in this movie of a sub-theme in my channel, which is bad behavior in women that we would never accept in men. Right? Again, reverse the sexes. Can you imagine a movie where a man tells you in a smug voiceover about how he so cleverly exploited the personality defects and insecurities of a number of women in order to enrich himself and to fleece those women? No. And then now imagine that movie where that male character is telling you, well, let me tell you how dumb these bitches are. Would that be charming? No, that movie wouldn't get made. But here's Molly's Game, which was trending on Netflix during the pandemic. So, Molly has been arrested by the FBI in the present story, and we keep flashing back to her earlier poker career. She needs a lawyer, so she goes to Ron Jaffe, played by Idris Elba. Now, Idris Elba is presented here as a counterpoint to Molly, and thank God, because otherwise Molly would be totally unbearable. He's presented as a man who is as smart as she is, as noble as she is, as hardworking as she is, as successful as she is, a very successful lawyer who will take her case on pro bono. Why? Because Molly is such a wonderful person, literally. He takes her case on pro bono when he learns that she would not sell her debt sheet. She was owed a good deal of money, and she could have sold those debts to someone else who would have tried to collect them from the debtors, but she wouldn't do it. Why? Because she couldn't be sure that the new owners of the debt wouldn't use muscle to collect. So Idris Elba is basically her counterpoint. And Idris Elba, of course, himself is tall, broad-shouldered, strongly built, deep, gravelly voice, very masculine presence. His character in this movie has an ex-wife, and the relationship with the ex-wife produced a daughter. So apparently Ron Jaffe is sexually attracted to women. But Ron Jaffe never displays any sexual interest in Molly. None. Not even to the audience. Now, of course, lawyers are not allowed to have sexual relationships with their clients, and there are good reasons for that. But there's absolutely no instance where Idris Elba seems to be sexually attracted to Jessica Chastain. Zero. You know why? Serious people don't sex. People with responsibilities, heroes we're supposed to admire, don't have sex lives. Also, Ron Jaffe's character seems to be single at this time. He has an ex-wife, but he's not in any other relationship, doesn't express any desire for any relationship, expresses no attraction to Molly. Although he does get rather hero worshipy of how smart and awesome Molly is. But there's no sexual attraction there. Even unexpressed, even internal. We don't see it. Serious people don't sex. So, flashback to Dean's game. Molly is both apparently asexual and celibate, but Dean is sexually jealous of her, although they have never ever had a sexual relationship of any kind or come anywhere near it. Dean starts to imagine that she's sleeping with any number of the players, including and especially Player X. Molly calls him Player X in her voiceover, a famous movie star who's playing in the game. Played by Michael Cera, by the way. Being an irretrievable dickhead, Dean calls Molly in the middle of the night to fire her and starts the conversation with, how many of my friends are you sleeping with? This, of course, is none of Dean's business. He's a terrible person. But he's concerned about Molly's sex life. He is jealous of her. He's expressing his sexuality. This is, negative meaning number 5, it's villains who sex. How can you tell who the bad character is? It's the person who expresses sexual desire. It's the person who has sex. It's the person who pursues sex. In contrast, Molly starts to tell Dean that she wouldn't have sex with any of his friends, even in a hazmat suit. Even though the people playing in this poker game are recording artists, celebrities, LA personalities, she's not attracted to any of these professional charismatics. Serious people don't sex. Molly leaves Dean in the dust and goes and launches her own poker business, taking Dean's players with her, including player X. At the first game, Molly comes out with cleavage pretty much to her belly button. Smoky eyeshadow, a sexy dress. This is another negative meme. Number 6, heroines can pretend to sex. Usually heroines, not usually heroes. Female characters can use their beauty, use their sexuality to lure, to mislead, to manipulate. That's fine as long as it's for the greater good in this case being Molly's bank account. They can't have sex though. That's over the line. She describes herself as the Cinemax version of myself in this getup. She goes on to say in her voiceover, I never became romantically or sexually involved with any of the players. The game would have fallen apart. Again, serious people don't sex. And that's fine, I can understand that angle. However, she doesn't have any romance or sexual relationship with anyone, ever. Not now, not later in the film, never. Here's an interesting question. What is Molly Bloom's sexual orientation? We know that she expresses repugnance at the idea of having sex with several men, but it's not because she's gay, it's just she doesn't like these men. She's surrounded herself with people with loathsome mental health issues, malignant narcissists and so on, and they're repulsive. She never expresses sexual attraction to any women, although she also surrounds herself with beautiful women, as we'll learn later. She doesn't even declare herself asexual. She just doesn't have sexuality. This movie covers a good 15 years of her life, from her late teens to her early to mid 30s. No sexuality. She's never in a relationship, never marries, no boyfriend, no girlfriend, no nothing, zero. Serious people don't sex. As far as we can tell in this film, Molly is a virgin. And she goes on being a virgin. Her game is filled with rock gods and movie idols and billionaires, and they line up to hit on Molly. You see, this is part of how awesome Molly is. Molly's really smart, and Molly's really hardworking, and Molly's really sexy, and everybody wants to be involved with Molly, but Molly turns them all down, and that's heroic. Celibacy is presented as heroic. At one point, her lawyer, played by Idris Elba, asks her if she wants kids, a family. His point is that if she wants to have a family in the future, she's going to have to let him do what he needs to do in a courtroom to keep her from going to prison. Her answer is very much. She gets a little emotional about it. He doesn't ask her if she wants a husband. The word boyfriend, husband, lover doesn't appear. Do you want kids and a family? Yes, that's admirable. Do you want the sexual relationship that traditionally produces kids and a family? We're not going to mention that. And this point strikes me as totally ridiculous. Let's look at Molly. Molly is very attractive in every way. She's well educated, she's very smart, she's hardworking, she's ambitious, she's very successful in her poker game hosting endeavor. She's making hundreds of thousands of dollars a year. She is beautiful, remarkably beautiful. Oh, and athletic. Was very nearly an Olympic skier. Not a full-time athlete now, but still, you step down from full-time athlete to one of the 10 most competent people at the gym, She's very attractive in every way. If she had wanted kids and a family, she could have done that. This movie covers her life from late teens through to about mid-30s. I believe, in fact, in precisely mid-30s. At the end, she says she's 35. She could have found someone. She's very attractive. It would not be difficult for her to get in a relationship and have some kids, but she hasn't done it. The LA game eventually falls apart because player X is a jerk-off. She goes to New York and starts a bigger game there, bigger stakes, more fish, richer people. Cue the second montage about how she identifies and recruits fish who want to throw their money around. She has a system for finding compulsive gamblers, gambling addicts, malignant narcissists, screwed up people who want to stay up all night losing $50,000 at a whack. She has a system for finding these people, and then she looks down on them and takes them as representative of all of humanity. She also recruits a team of people to work with her to, pour the drinks and deal the cards and all that. Every single one of those people is an exceptionally beautiful woman who's maybe 32 at the oldest. And they all dress in cocktail dresses. They're beautiful. They're done up for the events. That's fine. Heroines can pretend to sex. We see a shot of a couple of them in their underwear as they're dressing for an event, and Molly's, sitting at a computer doing prep work. But none of these girls ever mention ever having sex with anyone. And Molly insists that none of these girls ever had sex with the parade of rock stars and movie idols and billionaires who came through the doors. Ever. None of these girls even mention having a spouse or a boyfriend at home or a girlfriend at home. Nothing. Zero. Zilch. Nothing. They're gorgeous. They have no sex lives. Serious people don't sex. By the way, if you're finding this interesting, please remember to like, subscribe, share. All of that helps this project out a good deal. So, it's about 1 hour, 26 minutes into this film where Idris Elba, her lawyer, asks Molly if he expects too much from his own teenage daughter regarding her academics. And Molly says that she once knew a 22-year-old woman in LA who spent the weekend with a man in London. She was flown to London to spend the weekend. In return, she got a Chanel bag. Molly tells her lawyer, whatever you're doing with Stella, double it. This is very important. This is pretty much the moment. This story is presented like it came out of a concentration camp. But the facts are these. A 22-year-old from LA got flown across the world at no cost to her to spend a weekend in London. Now, notice that Molly doesn't mention really what happened in London. She doesn't describe London, but if this girl was kept chained in a storage unit between rapes and beatings, you think Molly would mention that because that reinforces the negativity of her narrative. But if you look at the offers that Molly has been made by all these players, all these millionaires and movie moguls, those offers seem to have to do with lobster dinners and private jets. So I'm going to guess that this girl did not spend her time in London chained up in a shipping container. She goes to London, this young woman in Molly's story, at no cost to herself. She gets a Chanel bag. Oh. Well, except I looked at Chanel's website here in 2020. This movie came out in 2017, I believe. And the cheapest bag they put on their website is $3,300. So this young woman was flown to London at no cost to herself, got to spend the weekend probably in a luxury hotel, very likely dinner, drinks, nightlife, going to the theater, something like that, was then given about $3,000 worth of consumer goods. And what did she have to do for it? Well, it's implied she had to have sex. Molly doesn't actually say she had to have sex, nor does Molly say who she was having sex with, but it seems to be a lot of good-looking millionaires who are throwing their money around and trying to have sex with girls like these. Might we consider the possibility that this young woman enjoyed the sex? By the way, if the story had been that this young woman had met Kevin down at the Dunkin' Donuts one day, decided to go to his place on Saturday, eat Chinese takeout and screw on the couch, would that have been better or worse? Right? If this young woman had been flown to London because someone wanted to pay her $3,000 to get her opinion on how they ought to decorate their hotel bar, would that be okay? Sure. If this young woman had spent the weekend shoveling shit on a pig farm for $10 an hour, that's honest labor. But she went to London, no one put a gun in her mouth. She went to London. She knew what was going on. To have some sex and get paid for it. Why is this terrible? What is the problem? But Molly presents it like it came out of a concentration camp. Notice that in contrast, Molly is celibate, evidently totally without interest in sex, absolutely broke, publicly humiliated because her name is in the tabloids over her poker game with celebrities, and likely on her way to prison, so who got the worst of that? And of course, we will shortly learn that while her father was an obsessively demanding hard-ass, his real sin was that he had a long-term sexual relationship outside of his marriage. Molly's problems, Molly's screwed up way of looking at the world, Molly's emotional dysfunction, is because her father had sex with some third party entirely who we've never met. It's villains who sex. Notice that there's no reference in this movie to her father ever having sex with his own wife. We never see them hold hands or flirt or anything. It's just anger and recrimination between them because he has sex. He's a terrible person. So, cut, Christ. Back to her job running the Manhattan gang. She's running 6 games a week, all-night games, and she's now a drug addict trying to stay awake, trying to go to sleep. But even when she is the coked-up princess of the poker room with a Jim Beam screwed permanently into one hand, she keeps her legs resolutely shut. Serious people don't sex. One movie star and rock god and business titan after another saying, hey, why don't you come to Paris for the weekend with me? She says, no, 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 no. Molly doesn't have sex. The mob shows up. They ask to be partners. She says no. They send a guy to her apartment to beat the tar out of her and steal all the valuables in the house to indicate that they're going to be partners after all. Except that then the feds swoop in, arrest a bunch of gangsters, and eventually Molly too, because Molly had gangsters in her gang. And this is where the flashback story merges into the present story about the trial. Interesting point. The movie and Molly want to make a huge point of how smart Molly is and how principled. She wouldn't sell her debt sheet for fear that the new owners would use muscle to collect, and she wouldn't name names in the tell-all book she wrote because if she named her players, that could upset and torment their wives and families. She won't name names to the court for the same reason. It will upset the wives and children of the narcissistic dickheads who she fleeced. Even when the court offers to return the millions of dollars the court seized from Molly as ill-gotten gains, she won't name names. Isn't Molly great? Isn't Molly smart? Except that Molly is so smart that her small business made a lot of money, then lost every penny by way of federal seizure. She became a drug addict. She was publicly humiliated in the media. She narrowly avoids a long prison sentence in the climax of the film. And a gangster came to her house and beat her half to death. And Molly is so smart that when she heard about a Brighton Beach poker game, Brighton Beach being a neighborhood in the greater New York area that's famously full of Russian immigrants, a Brighton Beach poker game filled exclusively with Russians who play all night and all day and splash their money around with wild abandon, it never, ever occurred to her that those guys were gangsters. What did you think they were? Dentists? In spite of her super smart staff, all those remarkably beautiful young women are geniuses as well, in spite of her super smart staff who can do background checks better than the TSA, she didn't realize any of them were gangsters, even when the Russians started showing up with $250,000 in a goddamn backpack. It never occurs to Molly the genius that they are using her as a money laundry. Molly is so principled that she won't release the names of her players, even when she risks prison by not doing so, because it could be bad, it could be upsetting for their wives and their children. Molly had no concern for the wives and families when the players were losing tens of thousands of dollars at her table on each hand in between snorts of nose candy. But now she's going to go up on the cross for these degenerates. This is the story Molly's telling. I don't think Molly's that smart. I mean, in some ways yes, and in other ways catastrophically no. And she's not that principled. She systematically exploited narcissists and gambling addicts for millions of dollars in profit. And at the end, she won't name names of these people who have abandoned her, by the way. None of them try to help her. And she winds up being hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt to the government, fines and so on. Hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt to her lawyer. She's a convicted felon, I believe, or certainly has been in the tabloids and so on. It's going to be hard for her to find a job. But the movie presents that at the end like Molly's great victory. Your life is in pieces, woman. About the best thing that's happened to you in the last couple of years is you managed to kick your cocaine problem. Well, good for you, congratulations. But it's not a very good scene from where I'm sitting. But what is Molly? Celibate. She never has a relationship with anyone. As far as we can tell in this film, she's a virgin. She never expresses sexual attraction to anyone. She never expresses a desire for any sexual relationship, even in the abstract. Serious people don't sex. Our heroes must be celibate. And then we can say she is a hero. Even when she is a criminal, running an illegal poker game, taking a rake, even when she is elbow to elbow with criminals every day, even when she is exploiting the personality flaws and psychological weaknesses of these people for her own enrichment and bumping lines of coke with them in the bathroom, she's our hero. Because she doesn't screw. Like, subscribe, come back next week. Thanks for your time. I'm Brian Downs.